So guys, as usual, I'm not going to reiterate all the technical details because chances are by the time you see this video, you know most of the key specs. I'm not going to go through all the details and specs. I think I want to focus on the riding experience. What's up, my biker friends? Welcome back to another video. I have the HUSQVARNA NORDEN 901 for just a single day and had a chance to get a first impression of the bike that I've been wanting to ride for quite some time now. I really like the first prototype version that came out, and I'm quite happy to see that the final bike that is delivered is so close to the prototype. A lot of times you have these super great prototypes, and then when you see the version that hits the market floors, it's not quite the same, but not so with this bike. It's very close to the original design study that we saw about 2 years ago, or 2.5 years ago, I don't know. Now guys, in this video I'm just gonna go into how it feels to ride the HUSQVARNA NORDEN 901 coming from a KTM 1290 Super Adventure model. Now for those guys that know the channel, I usually ride larger adventure bikes, and I'm just kind of dipping my toes into the waters of riding mid-sized adventure bikes. This is only the second time that I get to ride a bike in that class. The first one that I rode was a KTM 890 Adventure, and I will make some comparisons when I show you the riding videos to that bike as well, because it's still good in my memory, but I also will draw the comparison to my larger adventure bike, how it feels. And I will show you a clip when I get on the bike immediately after I dropped my bike off for service to see how it feels coming from a larger adventure bike, sitting on the HUSQVARNA NORDEN 901. Okay guys, this is the real treat. I finally get to ride this bike. It's really cool. Very excited about it. So these are just, seriously, that's the first few meters out of the gate. And as usual, I will compare this to my 1290 Super Adventure R in this case. I always wanted to ride this bike because I think it's I mean, I've followed sort of the development since the first sort of prototype came out, and just really loved what they did with the design. And of course all the tech that's in here, I mean, if you've seen this you already know that it's all KTM tech. So it's the 890 engine, it's a suspension from the 890, not the R version, from the regular suspension with a bit more travel in it. You know, it keeps to the same basic idea of keeping the weight low with the tank design, but it looks different. Obviously it's a different tank, it's not the same tank as the 890 series from KTM. And then the changes, obviously all the design elements are different, you know, from the tank design to the front of the bike. So the fixed windscreen, these big round mirrors, which I don't like, they're way too big and it's too clunky looking. You know, they use the same controls as on the predecessor 1290, and I think the 890 still have this. Immediately sitting on the bike, as compared to mine, obviously it does feel smaller. It's quite a bit smaller. Also the seat, it's wide, which is, I guess that's a good thing. You know, for long touring, I think a slightly wider seat, at least where your butt sits, and then it gets sort of slimmer in the front. So if you want to move around a bit and be more technical in off-road terrain, I think that kind of makes sense. Not sure how that is, of course, on long distance, but it's just like the immediate thing that you notice. It's wider than the seat even of my 1290 Super Adventure R, so it's quite apparent. Also the handling, it does feel, you know, like a much lighter bike, as it should. But compared to the 890, which I also had, you know, for a little bit of time when I dropped my bike off for service, the good thing is it feels like more of a motorcycle. It's much more motorcycle from sort of the wide tank and the front design. Also think that's a good thing, because it, you know, it gives it a more solid feel. It's just silly, but it's, you get on and it's like, okay, this is, you know, this is an adventure bike. The other one seems a bit flimsy. I don't know. It's just the first thing that I noticed. Now I'm just going 100 kilometers an hour right now, which is not very fast, and I can definitely feel a lot more wind pressure on my chest and on the helmet, upper arms. So as compared to the 1290 Super Adventure S and R, the 2020 or the 21 series, doesn't matter, there's a lot more wind hitting you in the chest. So that tiny little windscreen, it does something, but you can definitely tell you're sitting a lot more exposed in the wind, especially with your upper body, with the shoulder and your head. So this bike, I know it does come with quick shifter, or it has the option. It doesn't. This one doesn't. And easy shift is on, so you have to turn on the quick shifter. There you go. It wasn't turned on, so I guess no one has really played with this. I'm going to keep it in street mode for now. So, for the short amount of time that I could just take it to a slightly higher speed, just over 200, that's probably not the speed I would take it on for very long. And the reason is not for the lack of stability. It's actually quite stable at that speed, surprisingly stable compared to the 1290 series that I had. You know, on some occasions, especially if you go behind vehicles, you could get so much turbulence that the bike would start to swerve and get unstable at these higher speeds. That's not the case. That wasn't the case here. I was quite pleasantly surprised that that's not an issue. The thing that's gonna keep you from going that fast for that long is the lack of wind protection on this bike. You know, starting from 150 onwards, the wind's almost blowing you off the seat. So as I'm going a bit slower here on this on-ramp, there are small sort of bumps in the tarmac, and you can see that the bike's kind of hobbling around over those smaller bumps in the road. And with a larger, heavier bike, that part's a bit smoother. It's not a big deal. It's just something I noticed coming from a heavier bike, and that probably has to do with the weight itself. And maybe a longer wheelbase, that when you go over these smaller sort of uneven parts, it's noticeable that you're sitting on a smaller, shorter, lighter bike. Now I don't know how easy it is to see, but if you pay attention to the display now, how it dims down slowly when going through that overpass. It just now it just started to dim and then sort of go brighter again, which is cool because on my bike it just switches from daytime to nighttime mode, and it usually does that a tad too early. It's quite a good bike. It's a lot more of a motorcycle than, let's say, the KTM 890 Adventure is that I also had for a very short time. It was the first time that I actually got to ride the 890 motor, the mid-sized motor that KTM puts in there. KTM supplies the motor and the transmission and most of the electronics, so a lot of the design elements are HUSQVARNA, but the rest is sort of tried and proven KTM tech. And I was at the time quite amazed by that engine, the power that it puts out and the way it accelerates the bike. I did not expect that from the 890 motor, and same with this bike, it doesn't disappoint. I don't even know what the horsepower is. I have to lift it down here, but it feels like a lot of power. You don't feel like it's underpowered when you sit on the bike. Now, of course, this bike is lighter. It's not as heavy as, the big adventure bike, the big bore adventure bikes, but still it has a lot less horsepower, and somehow it doesn't feel that way. It's really, really nice. So I like the motor. It's awesome. Now, as I'm mentioning weight, I think that's always a big portion for me. So let's start with sort of the best comparison I can make to some of the lighter versions that KTM made. So the KTM 790 Adventure and Adventure R models, when they came out, they were in dry weight sub 190 kilograms. So that's pretty good, you know, fill it up with fuels just over 200 kilograms. I think that was awesome for a mid-size adventure bike. The way in that range of 190. Now with the 890, yes, the motor got bigger. Also, they got the upgrade for the Euro 5. So I know that adds a lot of weight just on the exhaust and the motor end of it. So then the 890 models, the Adventure and Adventure R models, are in the range of, I think, 194, 196 in that range. So still sub 200 kilograms. Now, if you look at this bike, this has a dry weight of 204 kilograms. So it's now heavier than the 200 kilo mark. And that's the dry weight. Now, that may not be the end of the deal because you get a lot in the package. You get a lot of, so the fairing is bigger, you have the fog lights are built in, and there's some extra stuff that's put on there. But I wish it was a little lighter. Now, if you compare that to my 1290 Super Adventure R, the dry weight is 217 kilograms. Now, it's a Euro 4 bike, so it's not really an apples to apples comparison. But it's only 13 kilograms of difference between the heavy big adventure bikes and now this one here. So it seems like even the mid-size adventure bikes, you know, they're trying to do lighter adventure bikes, and a lot of people like that, especially the ones that take the bikes off-road. But the weight's kind of creeping up again. You know, they're getting to the point where some of the big adventure bikes used to be just a few years back. And I think that's not a nice development. I wished they could find ways to save the weight. I know it's difficult because of the Euro 5 compliance and the extra whatever they need to put in, the extra exhaust, the extra catalytic converters, the extra electronics, and the extra stuff that they have to do to the engine. I know that adds weight, but it would be nice to see that dropping way below the 200 kilogram mark, especially for those riders that want to take these bikes off-road. So that feels actually much nicer than on the 890. A bit bouncy, of course, but it's a much lighter bike. Yeah, mine would be a little different here with this heavier weight. So considering it's the same suspension, that extra suspension travel helps, and it works quite well with this bike, I have to say. Also the lighter weight helps, especially compared to mine, even though it's only 13 kilograms and dry weight difference, it does make a difference. Side road is not in very good shape. Good way to test the suspension, and yeah, that extra suspension travel definitely helps this bike. Much nicer to ride like that. So guys, I just removed the seat and just have a quick look under the hood. Just kind of interesting to see because on my bike I have quite a bit more space under the passenger seat, and they've used that up quite well. There isn't really much that you can fit in here. And the one thing that of course I've noticed is the airbox sitting right under the seat. What an awesome idea and a good design choice. Because in order to get to my airbox, you need to remove the entire tank, as there's two seat positions, as there are on most of these bikes, with a split seat. So depending on where you snap in this part, it sits up high or low. Okay, that looks a little stupid here. Okay. They've solved that better on the 1290 models for KTM, because it just doesn't give you that edge. It's sticking out. I'm gonna try this out. Certainly not both my feet down, but I'm on my tiptoes. I don't know if you can see that, but heels are not going down. I'll tell you a few more things that I've noticed past few days, good and bad. So let's get started. Yeah, like I said, I'm not a fan of the key. I'm so used to not having one. And let's start with the obvious, which I haven't really addressed yet, which is the sound. I usually wear earplugs as I'm doing now, and so I didn't really think. I thought it was the earplugs that, you know, the engine sign isn't coming through or something. So I wore no earplugs yesterday as I was sort of cruising through the city. And I know it has something to do with Euro 5. It isn't so much HUSQVARNA's problem. I think it's all the manufacturers will have to sort of deal with this fact. But the sound is shit. I have to say, it is not a good sound. I mean, I'm, you know, when these bikes will all be electric one of these days, I'm gonna be totally fine with it. But until then, there's got to be some acoustic feedback of the bike that is pleasant. It doesn't have to be loud. I totally agree. They don't have to be loud anymore. I know that that's an issue. You know, we have enough of them. Not enough people don't like motorcycles and motorcycle riders, and noise is one of the key things. But it's gotta sound like a bike, and this, I'm hoping that Krapovic and all the rest, that they will have a way to at least get some kind of sound out of this, especially here in Europe. If you want to keep it street legal, it's going to be a challenge to make this bike sort of sound attractive, and give it a bit more of an exhaust load. That's a big part of the experience of riding a motorcycle, is kind of getting that acoustic feedback of the bike, and yeah, I don't like that. Now let's come to another thing that really bothered me, and it's hard to reproduce, but there's been so many occasions where I was starting off from the traffic light, coming from first gear, and trying to shift it into second gear, and it would just flop back into neutral. And then I would pull the clutch and get into second gear, and it shows second gear, and it would be bang right in the neutral. And this would happen like 3-4 times, and I look like a complete idiot because I can't get going while I'm trying to move the bike forward. I mean, and I thought it was just me being too stupid to get this right, but it happened so many times that I wonder if it's just really me, or if there's something off, maybe on this particular bike or something. I mean, we've had it for 3 days now, and you know, you would think after 3 days you kind of get used to it. Yeah, here you go. It's a neutral, see? You know, I'm trying to put it in second gear. 4th try. This is exactly what I was talking about. Perfect timing. I don't know what it is. I have no idea what it is. It's getting a bit louder now as we go on the Autobahn. So that's really annoying. I don't know if that's a thing. I didn't have that on the 890 Adventure when I rode it. I had it on this bike. Doesn't mean it has to be in all of these bikes, but that's something I noticed right away. And I know it takes some time to get used to a new bike, but that was really annoying. And you know, you pull the clutch in, and you try to put it in second gear, and it's showing up, and it drops back to neutral. And so many times that you almost stall the bike. Not sure what that's all about. I have no idea. Now I can keep it a bit slow now so you guys can still hear me because it's windy. The other thing that I've noticed on the bike, and that's a bit nitpicking, I guess, but I'm not sure why that is and how it is. I'm just going to explain to you what I'm experiencing on. This is set to street and road mode, so that's the mode most people will use it in. That's how I use it in most of the time. I try the Explore mode, and I usually don't try the rain mode. Makes no sense to me. But the Explore mode had a smoother throttle response. This is just set to normal street throttle response. Now what happens is, especially at low speeds, you know, as you give it throttle, it's not very smooth in the beginning. It's hard to explain, but you know, just twist it a little bit, and then it gets jerky. That's what I'm trying to say. It gets jerky when you let off the throttle. It gets jerky when you put the throttle on. That's something that I would see in a sports setting rather than a street setting with the throttle response. So the reason why I care is because if you just kind of want to smoothly ride and just glide along, then that's, you know, it gets jerky, and it's kind of funny because I don't know what that is. I would expect a sort of smoother delivery to just get into the higher RPMs. I don't know. I'm sure most people would not have commented on this. I noticed because even on my older bike, that's not an issue at all. And I know people, you know, they put mods in it in order to even improve that on my bike. I don't think it's an issue on mine, but you know, something to do with, I'm sure, Euro 5 again and all that. I don't know, but it's what I noticed, and even after 3 days of riding, still not something that I like. So next thing I want to address is the wind protection of this bike. Now I talked about it. It's mostly relevant if you go faster, probably faster than 130. I mean, you can feel it now. It's windy day today, and I can see there isn't much wind protection, at least on the upper body. Lower body is fine with the tank design. I don't feel anything, but the upper body, you get a little bit more wind. Maybe that's the case when you ride on a smaller bike, but someone coming, you know, a larger bike where wind protection is usually much better. It's something I noticed. I don't think it's a huge deal when you ride it for a long time. I just noticed as a comparison, it's much less. I can feel it now, and I'm just going 70 right now. Way too slow, by the way, on the Autobahn, just so you guys can understand what I'm saying. So that's something, maybe a different windshield will change it, but the different windshield will also change the look of the bike drastically. So that's something you need to weigh for yourself. But if you're coming from a larger bike, if you're trying to decide between a big bike and this one here, then know that these smaller bikes will usually, as a default, not be as good in that sense. And that makes sense when you do long touring, when you travel for a long time, when you go higher speeds for a long time, even regular roads, not just the Autobahn. So that matters, and I think that just comes with the territory, let's say that. So it's just something I noticed I wanted to put out there. Now, as for the electronic package, this bike basically has everything that the big adventure bikes have. There's only two exceptions that this bike doesn't have, and one of them is the keyless go system, whatever that's called. So basically you still need a key to turn on the ignition. And the other thing that is not available on this bike is a semi-active suspension system. Now, I don't know if other manufacturers have actually done that now in their mid-class models, of having semi-active suspension components in there. Now there's a pro and con to it. I think for this type of bike, having the manually adjustable suspension is totally fine. But I can totally see that, you know, others that are more road focused in riding and still like this motorcycle, and maybe they're coming from a bigger bike, they're used to semi-active suspension system. It would be nice to have the option of semi-active suspension, just, you know, pushing a button and changing the suspension settings. It would go along with all the other settings that you can already make with the traction control, the ABS, the throttle response, all those things you can already set on the bike. So having that for the suspension, I think that would be great. At least having the option. It doesn't have to be in the base model, but, you know, maybe down the road they will offer this for these bikes. It's not the biggest deal, but it's something that's missing when you compare it to the bigger adventure bikes. I hope you got a bit of an impression of what it feels like to ride the HUSQVARNA Norden 901. Of course, I would suggest you do that yourself. Take it out for a spin. I was pleasantly surprised how well this bike rides. I think it's much more of a motorcycle than, let's say, the 890 Adventure S. It's also a little bit heavier. I still don't have the comparison to the R model, but overall this feels like a great bike. I can definitely see myself touring on the bike. I think also the seat shape that they've made, making the wider rear seat, I think that helps. Also, there is a bit more wind protection than there is on the KTM 890 Adventure, up to a point, because if you take it to really high speeds on the German Autobahn, that's not something you want to do for very long on this bike. But for most people, for most parts of the world, they're not going to be riding at that speed anyway, so that's probably a non-issue. Now, for the small amount of off-road testing I've done, the suspension system was something I was concerned about, because I know it was coming from the 890 Adventure and I wasn't really too thrilled about it when I rode the 890. Now, for the small amount of testing here, you know, I have to say, no, I haven't really taken it out for a full day. But I think that works. It works for this bike, and I think it would work for most people. And even if you get to a point, you know, I haven't really adjusted it or anything, but if you get to a point where the components may not be enough for you, there's an upgrade path. You know, you can upgrade the suspension, which is a huge benefit. Now, for the question, would I ride this bike and would I be interested in buying it, and how does it compare? Honestly, this is probably a bike I would have to think about pretty hard. It starts from the design. Now it's not as aggressive as the KTM design, which I like, especially my model. I like that sort of aggressive styling, but somehow the overall design of the HUSQVARNA, I think it's a good looking bike. I think it just I like the way it's designed. It's still very functional in that matter. It feels like enough of a motorcycle. I like the lighter feel and handling of it. That's actually a good thing, especially when you intend to ride off-road a little bit. That's going to be a big plus. Now, you still have to consider that you probably have to add crash bars to it, because I'm not sure if the tank design is as good as on the KTMs, where you don't really need crash bars and you can just rely sort of on the plastic tank that nothing will break on it. I'm not sure about that. But you know, that's just nitpicking. But I think overall, with the power, the handling, and it's still enough motorcycle, this would be an interesting bike. That would definitely be an interesting bike, maybe sometime down the road. Anyway guys, I hope you found this a little useful. Just a quick introduction into the Norden 901, what I think of it. I'm quite impressed. I like the bike quite a lot. If you have ridden it, you have questions, put them in the comment section, like the video, give me a thumbs up. See you in the next video guys. Ride safe, stay awesome.